Hello, and welcome to the Cycles of Change program. We're here with Sal Lifrieri to talk about his new radio show, TheRiskAdvisor. Sal, welcome to the program.
Happy to be here.
Sal, tell us a little bit about the TheRiskAdvisor, what it's about, and what kind of interest does it hold for people?
Well, I think the time is now for a radio show that talks about risks that the public is facing on a daily basis. You know, as time goes on, we see more and more risks occurring, and we wind up just not getting a good understanding of what they are. So what we want the show to be able to do is go after three main areas and answer three main questions. The first of which is, what exactly is the risk? So we'll announce a risk for the week, and what we'll do is we'll bring in experts and we'll talk about what that risk is and identify that risk. Part two of that would be dealing with how you recognize what those specific risks are. So how are those things being done against you or potentially done against you? And then part three of it is, how do you defend yourself against it?
That is something we all need to know. I mean, we're not just living a lottery here. We need to be a little bit more aware and a little bit more fine-tuned. This is going to be a weekly radio show.
It's an hour-long weekly show. If you go to TheRiskAdvisor.com, you can see these locations and also the times that the show will air. It'll also be available on iTunes. It'll be available on iHeartRadio, on YouTube, and multiple other outlets as well.
Okay, so we're talking a bona fide radio show. This is not just a podcast.
Yeah, that was the thing that I really wanted to do with the show, was I wanted to be able to take some of my experience over the years in dealing in broadcast and dealing in media production, and to take that and actually produce a radio show that someone would actually be able to learn something from. I did not want to have an opportunity where you get a talking head, comes on the show and tells you, either, theoretically or practically these things are going to happen and is what you got to be aware of. What I wanted was somebody to be able to listen to the show, and probably the greatest compliment I would be able to get on the show is if someone said to me that they listened to the show with a pen and pad, and they were actually taking notes, which means they actually learned something and it was useful, and we were able to save somebody from becoming a victim.
And the things that we need to know are going to be very useful. The world is, the future ain't what it used to be.
It's gotten a lot more complicated. There are a lot more risks. There are things that, the obvious risks, things that we all grew up with, you kind of recognize, and things that you would normally not do. But when you start looking at the advances in technology and you start thinking about the different stories that you hear on a daily basis about people getting themselves in trouble, that's the problem. And that's one of the things that we really want to take a good hard look at, is to make people aware what are the risks. But instead of just saying, hey, there's a problem, there's a risk, identify it, let them know exactly what it is, let them know the techniques or the methodology that's being used against them, and then have that opportunity to be able to defend against it.
Well, I'm glad there's ways that are being explained to us. I mean, because there are new threats, or at least threats that are more common. How often have we heard that if you're in the subway or in an airport and you see an abandoned piece of luggage there, don't pick it up and carry it around and maybe take it to Lost and Found. You report it. It's a good reason for that. So many things that we need to consider that we don't often think about, what we can learn about on the TheRiskAdvisor program.
That's what we're hoping, is to be able to put stuff out there that the average person is going to deal with. You can watch a lot of television, you can listen to a lot of radio, and you can hear about terrorism, and you can talk about, potential attacks and what the methodologies are. But the reality is, fortunately, we're in a situation where that's not an everyday occurrence. However, other things, when you look at some of the cyber issues that are out there today, is something that's happening on a daily basis and is creating victims every single day. And those are the type of things that we want to deal with. So it's not a terrorism show, and it's not just a security show. We want to take this across the board to all sorts of risks and identify what they are, and just be able to inform the audience, to the best that we can.
And it's really quite surprising how everyday this can be. I mean, I've read articles such as somebody could just pass within 5 feet of a pocketbook or your wallet and be able to read RFID information off of that and skim information without actually physically contacting your card or something like that. Is that true?
That actually is true, although there are advances in the card technology now that it's making that a lot more difficult. Does it still exist? Sure. Some of the facilities that are still using the old card technology are susceptible to that, and that's true. If you want to equate it to something, more germane, when you had cordless telephones when they first came out, you could go to Radio Shack, and I'm starting to date myself by talking Radio Shack, but you can go to Radio Shack and you can get a scanner, and you could actually pick up those calls and you could listen to somebody on the phone. Where today that technology has gotten a lot tougher on security, and it's just a lot harder to be able to do that. Same thing with the cards, but that capability of being able to scan somebody walking by and picking up on it was true, and to this day is still true.
Those are just two examples of how prevention and protection comes after the fact. After this case, stories where somebody had their information hijacked or their calls intercepted when they didn't want. And so now this is continually happening in new and different ways in today's changing technology. But you bring in often experts that are on a particular field that you choose to come in and discuss it so that we can keep abreast with what's happening now.
We'll bring in experts on each week. We'll try and pick 1 or 2 topics a week for an individual risk that we've identified, or more importantly, we're asking the public, go to our website, go to TheRiskAdvisor.com and say, hey, I'd like to see a show about this, or ask a particular question. And as we start to see an interest or an increase in those type of issues, we would definitely change the show schedule and put someone on that would be able to react and respond appropriately to that and give the audience the answers that they're looking for. So a lot of what we're looking to do is, we'll plan out the show, we'll plan out our topics that we want to cover, but at the same point, we want to be able to be responsive to what's breaking and what's happening. So there'll be stuff that we want to do, stuff that we want to cover that we think may have some seasonality. Like this time of the year, we're looking at Christmas time. You have how do you handle yourself when you're at a mall? How do you stay safe while you're shopping? What are those minor security things that you should be doing that is going to help you in the long run? What do you do with the packages, and how do you hide them in your vehicle, and things along those lines. So there'll be seasonality issues that we want to address, as well as risks that may be breaking that we need to get messaging out on.
And each show is going to be featured on your site. As you mentioned, it's going to be in a myriad of ways that people can listen. But for anybody who just wants to listen to upcoming shows, look at the archive of past shows, they just go to TheRiskAdvisor.com and they'll see it all right there.
Yeah, we plan on having all of the shows archived on the site. And again, what we want to do is we're encouraging the audience to be able to go on the site, ask questions, post comments, ask questions of our guests. We're more than happy to forward questions over to prior guests that we've had. Again, we want to develop that relationship with the audience. We want to know what are the questions that they really want answered, and we want to be able to provide those answers.
That's the wonder of today's media. It can be interactive. It isn't just static and put out there and everybody watches it as an observer. You can respond to feedback, and you're going to listen to people and bring this out just as you listen to the experts.
Yeah, it's important to understand what the public's real concerns are, what their questions are when it comes to risk, and some of the things we're going to be covering, they'll probably never even think of as potential risks. One of the things that we're going to do, one of the early shows is on eavesdropping, and one of the things that in our world, we kind of find it a little humorous, but to the victim, it's obviously not, is how people bug themselves, and the use of nanny cams and things like that, or baby room monitors. When you realize the risks that those pose, So when you're going to purchase them, it's one of the things we'd like to cover in the show is how not to make yourself the victim on something as simple as that. And the recognition that these baby room monitors are basically an eavesdropping device, and it's susceptible to being listened to.
It's a different world than it was for when most of us were born. So you need to be up to date, aware, informed, and that is your safest thing.
Yeah, we call it situational awareness. We want you to be aware of your surroundings. We want you to be aware of the risks. But that's the other part of the show too, is that we want to do it in a fun and educational way. We're not saying the sky is falling and here's all the things that you got to be worried about. We don't want a paranoid audience. We want an informed audience.
Yes, so they can stay safe and enjoy listening to a program.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully we'll have a few laughs along the way.
Well, Sal Lifrieri of TheRiskAdvisor.com, I thank you for what you're doing for us and what you're putting out there. This is free for everybody to listen to, and we're all going to breathe a little bit easier when we're a little bit more informed.
Well, thank you.
Better safe than sorry. Sal Lifrieri of TheRiskAdvisor.com.
Thank you.